I made the right choice by starting a second project, because while I would be lying if I said that I found it easy to return to working on this ROM hack, or that I felt excited to work on it again, I did return to it, and excited or not, I managed to push past the few blocks that were still in my way, and at long last I finished the second chapter. Specifically, besides the event that allows you to recruit Soul the Thief and finally uses a dialogue exchange I came up with months ago, the biggest thing I added was a complete failure, or rather, a way for the player to be a complete failure. Let me explain. There is a lot to do in this chapter: hidden treasures to find, a character to recruit who can get a unique staff if taken to the other side of the map, an optional boss that drops a valuable item. But in terms of story, this chapter is a part of a pursuit. A pursuit of a villain so stereotypically evil that he doesn't need much of an excuse to kill his own underlings. It's not something you should delay for the sake of playing an archaeologist, but you can of course do so anyway. There's no big timer on the screen, and the blatant disregard for imminent dangers has become an RPG trope at this point. But I don't particularly care for following the conventions when designing this game, nor do I care about going out of my way to break them. But what I do care about is having a huge tree of different paths the player can go through depending on their actions. And so, if you take a little too long to defeat the local floating eyeball, and the chapter ends. The Finns have completed some great ritual, wiping half of the structures present out of existence. You have failed, and now you have to go forward dealing with the consequences. Because after all, failures, struggles and setbacks are a big factor in making stories engaging. Seeing someone crush every challenge with ease is rarely as interesting as watching them be challenged time and time again until eventually they emerge victorious despite the odds. But video games are a mixed bag when it comes to that, specifically when it comes to utilizing their nature as an interactive medium. Most of the time players' failures are just completely erased as they are merely thrown back to the last save state or checkpoint. And sure, sometimes you get a game over screen, maybe even a bit of information about how your failure messed everything up, but what does it matter if you just move on to a timeline where you didn't fail actually? In that case, all you have is predetermined non-interactive failures. Things like cutscenes, encounters you have no choice but to fail, or worse yet, ones you have to win, just to then be immediately defeated in the following cutscene. I love Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, but to say I'm disappointed with its integration of story and gameplay would be a huge understatement, to a point where discussing it is a video idea I've had for a while. Fire Emblem itself, at least the GBA titles, keeps big setbacks limited to cutscenes, but they do handle having to deal with small failures much better. Things like losing a unit, a village or a treasure chest doesn't end your story, unless you're the type to immediately restart the chapter, but it does set you back. And sometimes, typically in good RPGs, the player can succeed or fail in a big way based on their actions and still keep going. That is what I wanted to make for this scenario too. The story continues even if you take too long to clear this chapter, but you suffer consequences of this failure. Because speed is now even more important in this pursuit, Ilma does not have time to recruit Soul to the party, and Francis doesn't join you automatically either. On top of that, you'll have to deal with the bosses you failed to kill, as their forces join what other enemies were already in the next chapter. That is, unless you're fast enough to intercept them before that. Because while I didn't originally plan on having bonus chapters, placing one here just makes sense, and gives the player a chance to partially amend their mistake. The additional factors that determine whether or not you get that extra chapter are quite cryptic, keeping the Fire Emblem tradition of weird level requirements, but I will talk more about this in the future, when I actually get to implementing that chapter. As for now, one more thing to mention is the story consequences. If you paid attention during the failure cutscene, you may have noticed that while a number of buildings was erased from existence, one ruin was actually restored. Because, as it will be established somewhere down the line, when the Finns destroy something, it is not only erased from existence, but prevented from ever existing in the first place. And when that something is a centuries-old castle, the butterfly effect of that can be quite severe. In this case, the biggest change is that the Sanctian Order, which I have mentioned in the Week 7 devlog, never fell. And considering how far it has drifted away from its altruistic origins, it's safe to assume that you'll run into some issues with them, if you chase a group of monsters into their land. But that again is something that you'll mostly experience in the next chapter or two, so that is when I will discuss it more. And that's what I've got for this week. You can download the updated version of the ROM hack from a link in the description, most likely a link you'll have to manually copy and paste, because YouTube still isn't letting me put in normal ones for some stupid reason. But that aside, next week there will be a devlog for my Murder Drones project, and the week after that for Divine Dream. I plan on continuing with that pattern until one of these is complete. So until next time, farewell.